So, continuing on about the empath and how this leads to mediumship work and psychic work. Um, the empath, I want to kind of go back to a little bit to the beginning about like my childhood and how the empath is created. So, empaths, for anyone listening that is an empath or is helping an empath through their journey, empaths are created due to their injuries. So, their emotional injuries as a child and their injuries. So, let's say, um, I would say most of the time, empaths tend to be, their injuries come from being ignored and from not getting enough attention and the need for safety. Their only way to find purpose is to read the energy in the room, and then they can offer something. Um, my mother, she would be, say, in the kitchen, and if I read the energy right, I would know I shouldn't. I'm like, think of me as a junior high kid, right? Today's not the right day to cook in the kitchen with her, like to make something I learned in home ec class, like how to make muffins or something, because she will feel like that's competition. She will feel threatened for whatever reason due to her own emotional injuries, right? She doesn't mean any harm. Um, on another day, it might be like I read the energy, and the best thing to do if I want to be social, if I don't want to hide out in my room, is to offer to play cards with her or to do something where she's not going to feel threatened. So, my less predictable parent was my mother. And at times, she could even be partly, almost have schizophrenic tendencies, not on a regular basis, but there were times when it's like, holy shit, she's being crazy. And then she could probably, if you had to diagnose her in today's context, she would probably have some borderline personality tendencies, which really, again, stems from kind of the same causes of, um, not even having your own personal identity and being threatened as a child with, with that. So to have a unpredictable parent, and to find that, so now there's different ways of coping with that, right? So avoidance is a great way to cope with that. um, for some kids it's neglect meaning like maybe you even stay in a bad scene. Oh, dad came home and he's not my dad but somebody else's dad. He's a drunk abusive father, and he always drinks on Fridays because that's when payday is. So on Fridays, I flee the house. Okay, that's a positive thing. On Fridays, I avoid. So I go to my room, positive thing, or I neglect. I sit there and take the abuse. Like I wait and don't pay attention to the energy in the room. Dad comes in, he's mad because whatever, the car, something, and he goes into a rage, and I get abused. Okay, that would be personal neglect. So you're not sensitive, you're not reading the energy in the room, and you're neglecting that. Why would a child do that? Because it's too unpredictable usually. So, or they've been taught somewhere along the line that that will actually keep them inherently safer than fleeing or to avoid. So dad comes home, he's mad, where the hell is Jamie? Oh, in his room, he gets a worse beating. Okay, so he's taught to neglect. He's taught that that's to succumb. So succumb is the lowest. And succumb, then neglect, then avoid, then flee, and confront. Okay, now confront, you're not going to confront a man who's 3 times bigger than you and provides your safety. That just doesn't make sense until you're a teenager, then maybe you run away or something. So the empath is hypersensitive and can sense a lot and make a lot of decisions based on what's best on their knowledge in the past. So they're also getting help from spirits that are around them that are guiding them into saying the right things, doing the right things. And sometimes those things are only right to the person they're interacting with and not right for the empath. Well, and that's actually pretty much a given. So that's the problem of the empath. So if it's a positive situation, it's not harming the empath. But if it's a negative situation, it's still harming the empath. And what that's going to look like. So let's go back to the situation where the empath demeans herself. So she's in a situation with jealous women, and she decides that to be safe in this group of women, I need to be less than them, and that way they won't bully me. Now that is a good strategy for keeping safe, but it's also harming to yourself because you're avoiding the risk of confronting the situation and dealing with it. And that would be to call things out or to even say flat out, geez, are you guys jealous of me because I have a pretty new fur coat on? Or are you guys jealous of me because, you're sure acting kind of snobby to me today. Okay, you're immediately, if the empath has a big issue because the empath doesn't have good options. So the people that are less sensitive are actually less harming to themselves because they don't know about the energies circulating around them. So their tendency is to harm others more because they're not in that sensitive, I know how it feels kind of state. So the empath's biggest issue when they go through an awakening of sorts is that they have to go through a revelation, which is the revealing of how others have harmed them and how they are harming themselves by letting others harm them, by demeaning themselves, by taking themselves down and not becoming as great as they could be. And that's the tendency that an empath needs to really, really acknowledge. And it's a very confusing place because you wonder, in a sense, you feel like you've sinned not, in a sense, like you haven't done anything wrong. You haven't hurt people, but you've hurt yourself. And that still creates a level of cause and effect in the world that will take you into a darker and darker place until you deal with it. And that's a very confusing time for the empath. I personally have gone through several challenges on that. And again, it's a tricky position for an empath. I have several examples. I'll give a more recent one. After my 10 years of avoidance, you could say fleeing and avoidance, and just checking out of the world because I couldn't deal with that level of energy, absorbing that and channeling it back. And what do I do with this? That I had at some point to go back into society and make money again, not just a little bit of money to get by. I needed to actually become stable and live in a house again, not a motorhome. And I couldn't live on the beach anymore in Mexico because it just wasn't really working out. Like the laws of the universe were kind of pulling me down a little bit too much. So I had to kind of cope with that. So I went back into society and I got jobs. And at this point for me in my journey, I had become even more open. So I had already had like these awakenings back starting in 2008. And then, strong awakenings. And then become an ayahuasca shaman in 2014 or 2013. I forget which year that was, but by the time I went back into society, I couldn't really be untruthful. So I went to a car dealership because I knew I could be in sales because I had been in sales for a long time in my life. And empaths make great salespeople, great, because they can read everything. They can read everything. And if they can get out of their ego, they can respond the right way. But the problem again with an empath is they want to respond to give the client what the client wants. So if you're in sales, even though the empath has a superpower to read them, they give the client what they want back instead of the braver confrontation of, I know you're saying you don't like this house, but have you noticed this is the best one for you in this price range, right? So the empath wants to soothe all the time, to soothe and pander to them. So they want to say instead, oh yeah, I wouldn't like this house either. They want to agree with them or give them what they want back. And that's, again, the curse of the empath. So now going into getting fired from jobs, you sense things, you know things. Now, if you keep pandering to your environment, chances are that it will allow you to do that, but your soul condition will still suffer. So you're still bringing yourself down. So when you start to confront it and you become braver and you ask more questions or you say things that are no longer pandering to them, but they're giving you the power of your awareness, that it doesn't go over well. So what you're going to find as an empath is that at some point, depending on how strong that is, you'll have pretty much no choice but to create a job for yourself or work in an environment where you're not going to keep running into that problem, because it's just going to keep coming up. You cannot channel that as an empath anymore. You have to step in to that other role, not the injury role, because again, your soul condition will just keep being pulled down, because you're giving into it. You're giving into how others want you to respond to them, and it will work. It works, but you become less and less till you have nothing, or till you're kind of somebody's slave, or you're really a servant to, and I don't mean servicing, I mean you're kind of somebody's slave. So we see that a lot with empathic women that are abused, right? So they'll stay in those situations for a long, long time because they still feel purpose in that, because they're still giving that person what they need. They need to feel power when they abuse you. You give them that power. So it's a journey that takes some skill and some knowledge, and there's a lot of tools on the internet right now. And I hope this message helps to people on that journey. What I would like for the world is for the people who are empathic, the men and women, for them to start becoming mediums. The world needs mediums, and I'll tell you why. In fact, I'm going to tell you why in the next part, but just to give you a teaser on that, imagine everybody that's ever existed, okay, since the beginning of time, passes, dies, and all they're really dying is their physical body. So when they die, that's all that's dying, that physical body. Their spirit body, which is residing in the physical body, leaves. So it leaves the physical body. Imagine you're laying on a hospital bed and it sits up and goes, holy smokes, I'm out of here. And it takes off. And there's billions of people that have passed. that are in the spirit world. And there are different levels of love in the spirit world. So when you pass into the spirit world, you might be stuck in a level that's earthbound. And actually, there's an enormous amount of work that needs to be done to help people that are earthbound. And when I say people, I mean spirits that have passed, because they're just people too. And they need help knowing that they've passed and that they're earthbound. And so sensitive mediums can sense this energy. They could be walking through a park and realize, oh, somebody committed suicide in that tree. They get maybe a sound in their ear, like, or something when they're going by. They're like, oh, that kind of hurts. What is that? They look around. Something feels weird up there. And some of those spirits are so incredibly grateful to even, a lot of them are walking around wondering why nobody else is talking to them, because they're kind of in this intermittent space where they don't even know they've passed, and they're trying to interact with those that are still in physical form. And that's a very sad thing. That can go on for a long, long time. So mediums can help. That's just one tiny, tiny bit of the work that they can do. There's all this knowledge of the manipulations that need to come through, the darker forces. And I'll be talking about that in one of these parts at some point, about the darker forces and the revealing on those, and how much work there is to do, and how to not be affected by those. So how to strengthen and recover from your childhood injuries enough that nobody can key in and use you or do anything to you, and that you just see them as people too. And you just see them as, somebody whose injuries are so big that they're, doing things of horrendous means to harm others. And that by being able to help and understand what those forces are, that you can make differences in this physical world for the next generations. And think of your earthly life as your first life. And reincarnation is there's actually incarnation, which is you in a physical body, and reincarnation is it's different than how we're perceiving it. So a lot of the downloads that people get that are spirit downloads, those actually have, like, there's some more information, and I'll cover that in coming episodes too, but there is more information that will help you understand why it is what it is and what's really going on there, because there's a lot of misunderstanding with that doesn't make sense. For example, why are 500 people feeling like they were all, Cleopatra or something? And they're like, I got the info. I got the info. And it's like, you got the info because that there's this spirit named Cleopatra that's passed. And just by saying her name and calling her in, you can get the info. And if you resonate with some of the things that happened to her, then they will, in a sense, engage with you. And when you get that information, it feels like you, because again, you're an empath. And an empath, you don't know the difference between your feelings and somebody else's feelings. So empaths are totally susceptible to getting those past lives downloads when they're really just spirit downloads of their past lives. And that's just a titch of what I still have to talk about. So that'll be it for this session, and we'll continue on with more soon. Thank you.